Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is January 3rd, 2025, and you're watching the Daily AI Show live. With me today, we got Beth and Andy, and I'm Brian. And today we are talking about the new 2025 rules for prompting, prompt engineering, if you like, just general prompting, custom GPT writing, or on and on and on from there. But basically, we did this similar show last year. It was actually one of our best received shows. And I think it makes sense, right? People are trying to figure out, okay, we've now all been doing prompting. Well, a lot of us have been doing prompting well over a year, into 2 years now, even a little bit longer. And things have changed. Things have changed. They change throughout the year. And so this is a good time to pause as we're getting into 2025 and say, okay, if you're writing prompts for yourself, if you're writing prompts to be used publicly by others, what do you need to know? How have the models evolved with their improvements over 2024 that really do change the way you go about prompting? Because the same old ways I was doing it at the beginning are not the same ways I do it today. So that's what the conversation is about. It's about us giving you our best tips about how to do really, really good prompting in 2025. Does anybody want to jump in before we start jumping into the numbers, or anybody want to give more oversight than that?
I'll just say that, unlike you, I think that there's something that's continuous about the best ways to prompt an AI, although there are changes.
Sure.
What applies now for me through experience was always there present, and a lot of it just has to do with the language skills that I need to apply when communicating to an AI or anyone else.
Yep.
So I'm going to talk about those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point out as well, is that no, not everything has changed. And I think that's a good call out, Andy. A lot of the core basic ideas and principles remain. But depending on whether you're working with Claude, depending on whether you're working with ChatGPT or OpenAI, and possibly Gemini, which I personally don't work with as much. Maybe Beth, you'll be able to bring more insights into that. But regardless, each tool is unique. And while the general core prompting techniques will work globally, good prompting is good prompting. I definitely have seen some, unique abilities of one over the other that are definitely worth talking about as well. So what about you, Beth? Anything you're thinking about, like, before we dive into some of the tips themselves?
I'm going to say that I'm also doing prompting for image generation and video generation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Some of the keys in being able to get the results that you want are similar in the different models giving different results. I will also say, Andy, I have taught enough people that if I present the prompting rules, we're actually going to give you some new rules. But if I presented the exact same ones, people who heard us last year would experience it as totally new information. So it's fine. Go look at our 2024 show as well. But yes, core prompting is good, but there are some things that we've learned since then, and the models have definitely changed.
Maybe that's where the best place to start, because I love that you're going to get into image as well as video. And yes, to the video, I can tell you, as somebody who's been using video effects VO2 from Google, wow, what a difference really good prompting makes for getting amazing videos. I had a video yesterday on LinkedIn that I was using just to supplement the post I was putting out. And maybe I'll share it here in a little bit, of a dog unplugging a computer underneath a desk. And whereas there's some shuddering and stuff like that, I'll show it to you guys in a second. A really nice, long, descriptive zoom in prompt, the shadows, the colors, the time of day. VO loves all of those descriptive elements to it. And so that's really probably a good place to start, guys, is just about clarity. Now, this is a rule that has not changed. It's about giving clear instructions. It's probably like the number one thing you should really think about when you're writing really good prompts. I always say, I teach this all the time. I say garbage in, garbage out. And that's not to make anybody feel bad. Sometimes I'll butter that up a little bit, not use the word garbage. But that's really what I mean, is that if you, given all three of us, given the same custom GPT that I create, even though I've done a lot of work to put in and make sure that the user experience is great, even with all of that, if all three of us, one of us, Beth does a beautiful job of saying exactly what she's hoping this custom GPT is going to help her with, and it's helping her along, and Andy gives it 3 words, and I give it somewhere in between. Even with that custom GPT being created for that specific purpose to make the user experience, definitely one of us, Beth, is going to get the better outputs. So whether you're using a custom GPT or you're writing custom or just writing prompts in general, I know I'm saying custom GPTs, but generally with prompts, it really does to start with clear and concise instructions. And that absolutely has not changed from 2024. That's a rule that's steadfast. You're going to get the best outputs when you put in the best inputs. And that does take a little bit more time. It requires you not being lazy. And it also is going to serve you in the long run because these are going to be prompts that you can use over and over and over again. Lazy prompts don't get used over and over again. They're one-offs or whatever. But when you're thinking about actual things in 2025 that you can get off your plate, as we move towards more agentic workflows, this is what you should be thinking about, is putting a little more time into putting out really clear and concise instructions. So I don't know, Andy, is that one of the things you were thinking about as you start talking about, rules that have stayed the same as far as prompting for you?
Yes, and I want to get down to the specifics of language. Like, think about how many times you've been having a conversation with another human, and they say something in a sentence that has ambiguities in it, and you don't want to interrupt their exposition by saying, well, wait a second, stop there, you had an unclear pronoun reference that's really confusing me there. You used she twice, but there were two antecedent she's out there. Which one did you mean? You just try to hang in there and wait until it gets clear. So when Brian says clear and concise, there are certain grammatical mistakes that are natural in our natural language that you really want to try to avoid when you're working to optimize an LLM's response. And one of them is just run on and compound sentences, which I have a unique problem with. I can keep going on in the same sentence forever and ever. And what I really find myself doing when I'm refining prompts that I've built is, oh wow, I gotta reorder this, and I got to go back and edit it so that these are really short declarative expressions and they're done in a sequence that's logical.
Yeah, Anthropic has a great example of this. As you were talking, I was clicking through other tabs trying to find exactly what their example was, but it's something like, oh man, I'm going to mess it up. But it was something like the person inputs, their example was like, I need a flowy, 3 to 5, words and sentences, and this long thing. And then but the better input would have been, I need 3 to 5 concise statements. Right. Like, take out flowy, these are nice words. We like to think they're helping, but these are models. And just as if you turn to an intern, just give them the goods, just give them the stuff that's really going to matter. And by the way, you can over engineer that for sure. You can definitely get too concise, and then it actually hurts the prompt. So there's a fine line there where you can shorten and you can, put in just the best words, which I'm with you, Andy. I have the worst time with being super concise on this show as well as in prompting, but you can actually over engineer that and actually hurt the prompt. And then you go, okay, I went too far. But it's that fun back and forth of, could I do this with 3 bullet points? Could I do it with 2 bullet points and get the same quality answer? And if you can, that's a great place to be leaning towards. And you might have to find out that you got to put back in that 3rd bullet point, that it definitely needs it in order to get a good result.
I have a quick example sentence that's run on, but also conflates a number of different LLM processes requests into the same sentence. And I'll give you this example. It says, the user prompts by saying, I need you to write a short summary about physics and then compare quantum mechanics to classical mechanics, but also ensure you include references and a conclusion and ask a question at the end.
Right.
Okay. Now, the person who wrote that prompt, like just free form, going forward, thinks, okay, well, I've got everything in there.
Yeah.
But the ambiguity comes because there's multiple specific types of tasks that LLMs are good at: summary, comparison, referencing, conclusion, a question. All of those things are distinct. And if you could separate them out into bullet points, the LLM will understand you much better and it won't be confused about the main objective.
Yeah. Go ahead, Beth.
So this is the point in the show where we're going to say we don't all agree on the tips and rules that we're going to give you. Although we do agree on the principles, I would say that LLMs have gotten significantly better. So I often start with a simple prompt, right? I don't start from prompt engineering. I start with a simple prompt and an example of what I want it to do. And that can get great results. If it doesn't get great results, now you're going to prompt engineering and going to more things. But the thing to keep in mind with prompt engineering in terms of writing really specific instructions is that you don't understand the weight that those instructions are giving. And that's why I tend to give an example more than I try to describe what I'm asking for. And we've talked a little bit about these things called gravity words. That's a concept that Rob Lennon talks about. But like story or metaphor or joke or comedy are gravity words. If you use that phrase, if you use that word in your prompt, that will skew the whole prompt in that direction. It will try very hard to say once upon a time, or, you know what, like, this is like a banana and a banana is like a Volkswagen and a Volkswagen. I mean, it's like, it just goes, yes. Beth, iteration, iteration, iteration. Yes. And know where you are, like know what your need is. If you just need something to rewrite the email that you did because you weren't really happy with it, that doesn't need a ton of prompting. If you have the kinds of things that Brian builds custom GPTs for, you need to be very specific in your prompting. So that's my first thing. Know where you are in your process and whether you need an important prompt. And like something that gets done 3 times is sort of the rule, right? If you're doing it 3 times, you should build a custom GPT and it should matter.
Let me add that the example that I gave, which is this compound collection of different requests, it can be improved without you having to go deliberately through and making it into a structured prompt unless you like to do that sort of thing. And it helps your thinking because now there are plenty of LLMs that can help you improve that prompt. And they'll take that sentence, as ambiguous as it is, and they'll generate a structured set of instructions for you in a second. And then if you add to that prompt, okay, now ask me some questions, or you provided feedback on its structured response to that, then you can do an iterative process with the LLM to refine a prompt that you then give back to the LLM to generate the output.
Okay, so I have comments on both of these because Andy, you just rolled into one of my other tips, which is to absolutely use the LLMs to help you write better prompts. That's 100%, and you're right. We should talk about Anthropic's tools for that because it's one of the best as far as I'm concerned. I don't have a pushback on what you said, Beth. I think though, as I heard you talk about, I just like to start with a general sentence and then move from there. So that I don't accidentally, or at least the way I heard you say it, accidentally limit the LLM. Here's the only thing I would say to that. You have to be very careful about what your intended outcome. And I feel like you kind of said that with the email example. You said, well, if you just needed to revise an email, that's your intended outcome. And the reason is because LLMs, you can unnecessarily inhibit the modern LLMs, the 2025 LLMs. I'm going to talk about that in a second. If your intent is towards like research, yes, I do agree that you have to be careful with how specific you get into your initial prompt because it could inhibit the actual quality of the research. You might unintentionally cause the LLM to look one direction when you wanted it to be more broad. So I do think my only caveat to what you said is, yes, I agree with you, but that really has more to do with, I don't think that's the way you start. That wouldn't be, at least is my opinion. I would not start every prompt or journey towards writing prompts or maybe trying to find something that replaces something I'm doing 3 times a week with a general prompt. I understand why you would. I just wouldn't. I would, because it really depends to me personally on what the desired outcome is going to be. Is it research based? Is it broad in general? Am I leaning heavy if I'm in OpenAI? Am I leaning heavy on the search capabilities to go out to the internet and pull in research? That's one way to go. Obviously, if you're Anthropic, you don't have the internet. It's a closed system. It's a closed loop. So you're looking for more the creative side, but it's not going to pull anything from the internet. It doesn't have the ability to do that. It's a different tool. So that's the only thing I wanted to say back. But feel free to respond to that, Beth. But also, I also want to make sure we get to a lot of the other tips as well. But
so I think what I said or meant was I often go with a simple prompt to see what the result is. Yes, I think if you're looking for a specific kind of output, that needs to be in that too. But again, if I'm looking for a specific kind of output, I don't want to limit. I want to see what it thinks that output is in a fairly simple way, because the main way that I prompt is through examples and iteration. And I follow a Rob Lennon technique that talks about exemplars, so that the way that I'm prompting, when it gives me an answer, I'm editing the answer in the back end. So it's thinking that it's thinking. In the structure of the conversation, I have implied that this is their response to me. I've fixed it. It becomes an exemplar, and now we move on with that. So the reason that I don't use text quite as much is because we don't know the patterns that those words mean. And if I've asked for something and it's given me a response, I know what that means to it, right? Like I know what those words mean. It gives me this. Can I shift it to now tweak that, and it's better for me? And then that's just an exemplar situation. And then there are other ways that I do it. I will give more examples, but thank you, Brian. Let's move on.
Yeah. Okay. So I have another one. Well, you know what? I'm going to talk about one that's unique to ChatGPT. So just in the last few months, ChatGPT's search capabilities, its web search capabilities, got massive improvements. And although it has come up into the news and sort of in the 12 days of the ship miss and 12 days of OpenAI, it never really got quote unquote like the news story that I thought. We got news stories about, oh, you can go use search now and you don't have to be a paid user. We got news stories about like search at GPT, but I'm talking specifically about the search that happens when you're using a basic prompt, and now also inside the custom GPTs, because that just came about as well. Inside the custom GPTs, just for everybody's reference point, don't always play by the same rules as just writing a prompt outside. You can use exactly the same prompt, a super long prompt if you wanted, with multiple subtasks and steps in it, with multiple examples, the whole shebang, right? It could be a really, really detailed prompt. And you can run that. You could take that exact same prompt and run it inside a custom GPT, and you will not more than likely get the exact same results. I mean, not even to the word. I just mean like the same style of results. Custom GPTs are a little different beast. Well, custom GPTs, as well as your regular prompts inside ChatGPT, now have very, very powerful search capabilities. And I'll give you an exact example of this. In the past, when I was creating custom GPTs, I would typically say, if I wanted to research a company, remember, I work in sales a lot, not to you guys, obviously, but to everybody listening to this, I work in sales a lot. So a lot of my brain power is occupied in 40 hours a week at scale.com, but scaled, towards how do I create AI solutions for sales professionals? That sort of sums up my life outside of the daily AI show. And so I'm usually thinking about what's the user experience for sales reps, for AEs and other roles inside, all the way up to the CROs and so on and so forth. And what I would typically do is say specifically to the user, because I want to have a great user experience. A lot of what I do is for other people, right? So I'm obsessed with that user experience and how easy it is for them to use it. And it used to be fairly laborious for them, even from what I would create. I'm just talking about 2024, since the time we've done a prompting show. And that would be give me not only the main URL, but also give me 3 or 4 other URLs that you think would be valuable from such and such a company, right? If you were going to go to Microsoft.com, you probably wouldn't just give it Microsoft.com, because in the past, this is a big change now. In the past, ChatGPT would look at Microsoft.com, period, end of story. And whatever's on that landing page, whether it's a great homepage or it's a flash homepage, ChatGPT could read some of it well, and some of it couldn't, because it was embedded in images. And that website might be really, really visually impressive, but not great for knowledge to feed ChatGPT. So we would get around this by asking the user to go give us the about page, or maybe there was an investors page or whatever. That was a user input that needed to happen. In some cases, the investor one would be an example of that, like a side. But in most cases, now what I find is that if you actually, back to sort of Beth's point here, if you stay a little more broad and say, this is the company I'm researching, and you click on the sources, there's 20 sources there. It's way better than if I had initially limited it to 2 or 3 websites to ChatGPT. That is a massive 2024-ish going into 25 change. I mean, massive for me, at least. When I build custom GPTs all the time, this is a big change. This is a fundamentally change how I write prompting that other people can use in GPTs, because it's a good thing. Now I actually don't have to ask the users to do more work. ChatGPT has now taken on quite a bit of that really deep research. And now I can focus in the prompting on, what do I want to get out of that research? What are my intended desired results that the user, the sales rep, needs to see on their end? And that's where I focus the prompting. But I don't have to necessarily burden the user anymore to give me those 2 or 3 URLs. In most cases, investor relations, things like that, like Q4 reports, things like that. Those are specific. But if I'm asking, how does this company make money? What do they do? What are their value props? What are their pain points? What are some of the jargon that this title would use? These are all the things I care about in sales, and that sales reps are going to care about. That stuff can now be done much, much faster using the enhanced search. And so this is possibly a Google thing as well with Gemini. Claude, it wouldn't apply to. Definitely a ChatGPT thing for sure. All right, what do you guys got? Unless you got more on that one.
I do something similar with that, but I'm realizing that most of the prompts that I'm writing are in Perplexity. And so the idea is I often ask Perplexity for an example of the output that I'm looking for, or the vocabulary around it, because I want something that I know exists, but I'm not sure what other people call it. And so I am, like, search is embedded, because Perplexity automatically searches in order to give you your response, unless you change its focus. So yeah, I have not played very much with ChatGPT's search, because I'm in Perplexity, but I love your calling it out, because that's really important.
Well, here's another, good point to that is use them more than one tool. Perplexity is phenomenal when it comes to doing search and deep research and stuff like that. And you're right. I teach people to use the results of Perplexity back in ChatGPT for that reason. But I will say the gap between what Perplexity used to do for you versus what ChatGPT can do it embedded internally has definitely narrowed. I still love Perplexity overall. But again, from that user standpoint, it's like less moves is better type of thing, Sorry, Andy, you're about to say something.
I was going to say, I think there's a useful distinction to be made between the prompt, which is the user prompt that you use in a conversation with ChatGPT or Perplexity, and instructions, which is a prompt that has multiple steps and specific context and guidance, and kind of approximates what a system prompt is, in terms of guiding the LLM in its response with lots of other parameters, if you will. So I don't think of myself, when I'm having a conversation with ChatGPT, as prompting the GPT, unless I'm asking, some multifaceted question, and I have to write a little bit longer into the query box. So if I'm on Perplexity and I'm asking a question, it's a sentence, right? One sentence. If I think of writing a prompt, I'm thinking about instructions as in a custom GPT or the instructions panel in a chat GPT project. So in a project, you can have, as in a custom GPT, you can have files and instructions. And the instructions component of that is writing a prompt that has a specific set of instructions that you want the LLM to follow as its agentic, approximating agentic capabilities, following your instructions and using the files and then generating outputs, including files, which is something that I've been working on in the background here. I shared with you, Brian, yesterday in the guided training Slack channel that we're talking about. But that's writing prompts to me. Talking to an LLM is not, I don't think of that as writing a prompt, although it is but it's a very simple user prompt. And that's what I think, Beth, you're referring to when you say, I want to start with that. I start with a conversational mode and I'm going to see what the LLM can kick back to me. And then I'm going to talk to it about what other facets of response I want to include. And I'll do that in this sort of back and forth, Q&A response chain. And that is a prompt method. Absolutely. But I don't think of that as writing a prompt. Writing a prompt, I think more of what Brian does when he creates a custom GPT and he packages that up and puts it in as the prompt. And that's what's going to be used by his customers. That's the written prompt in my mind. That's my distinction anyway.
It's two different use cases, right? I'm writing prompts. I'm writing prompts to be used by other people for an intended outcome, right? I want to get a great discovery call preparation document for a sales rep. That's a specific outcome. And how am I going to write that prompt to get it? So you're right. That's not me just having a general conversation with the ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, right? And I think that brings up a good point for 2025, which is that I've seen this a couple times. I talked about this yesterday. I said, when I was talking about the dog in the video that I created, the post was about, hey, I just had this thought. It was just a random thought yesterday while I was working on this AI project for a client. I said, I think that in 2025 or around in the next year or two, hearing somebody talk in the other room to their AI agent, their computer, will be as normal as hearing Beth talk to a dog in the other room. If I was in this room and Beth is in the other room and Beth is just talking to a dog, and it just in normal, like however you would talk, like, are you hungry or whatever you might say to a dog, or do you want to go out, or you're a good boy or whatever, right? That if I heard Beth saying, I wouldn't be like Beth is deranged in the other room. I'd be like Beth is talking to a dog. That wouldn't even occur to me. Right now, I think, as we're having conversational AI, prompting is really what it is, and we're talking to these AI tools. I think in very near future, me sitting here talking in this office with the door closed, my wife is in the other room right now, and if she was just to hear me talk and she's like, you're not on the Daily AI show, that sounds normal. I know you're talking to Beth and Andy, but if I was just here talking to my computer, I think pretty soon that's just going to be a normal thing. And the reason I bring that thought up is that you're right, Andy, like we are driving more towards conversational AI. The models are getting smarter, but it does matter how you propose the prompting, the questions and stuff like that. So even as we move towards agentic workflows, verbal commands versus written commands, all these steps, all this thinking, all this idea of chain of thought, and how do I want it to do? Or back to Beth's point about, let me start with something simple and together we'll build together to this future output, I think is all part of it. And the last thing I'll say on this is that this came from the coder.com, who was interviewing Anthropic, some of their designers and coders and stuff. And it says, as the performance of the models increases, the ability to understand and specifically query the actual needs and intentions of the user will also become more important. The role of the prompt engineer could thus evolve from that of an agency employee who issues precise instructions to that of a designer who consults the model as an expert. And I 100% agree with that is where we're moving towards. But this is all the stuff we're doing today is such the basis. It's the fuel that's going to make that really, really good. So as you get better at the stuff we're talking about today, you're going to be better at having conversations with AI in the future, which is where I feel like this is moving.
And one of the things that I want to make sure we're giving that we're setting the foundation for you all. If you're in this because you want to learn how to prompt, or you want to know, like, okay, so what do I need to do in order to prompt? There are lots of things you can do to become a better prompter. I am saying don't try to become a better prompter before you start prompting, right? The most important thing that you can do in learning to prompt is to start from where you are. And examples will give you a big lift for that. And there are lots of information about prompting. I think that's where, like, Brian and I are kind of diverging. Brian is an expert who teaches lots of people, and I'm a little bit more, I'm working with beginners. So awesome.
Well, look, you're right. A lot of my time is focused on that user experience. So you're right. I do write prompts for myself all the time that I personally use. I've written lots of prompts for the Daily AI Show too, and custom GPTs that solve one-off problems or whatever. So yes, my brain is typically in that space, and I think that's fair, Beth. I agree with you, though. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not diverging on the idea of get in there. It's put the time in there, play, iterate. As somebody said in the comments, keep trying, keep changing things. Don't accept whatever the first result is, and understand that there's probably a way that it can be adapted to get you the highest quality of the result that you're expecting. By simply being in that conversation. I think we're not diverging there, but yes, I understand what you mean, where my attention typically is as far as prompting and stuff like that on there. So all right, I have all sorts more on my list, but let's move on to you guys.
Yeah, since I started with the premise that, prompting for me anyway, and I'm talking about capital P prompting, like writing a full prompt that's going to sit in a custom GPT or in a project. My point, I guess, at the outset, was I haven't seen a real dramatic change, although I have experienced better responses from LLMs to instructions. I think that the instruction following capabilities of LLMs have significantly improved.
Absolutely.
But you guys are on the tips for 2025 bandwagon, and I want to hear what it is that's really different about now, about even within the idea of a structured prompt or in a conversational series of prompts. What's different that you ought to think about doing now that you weren't doing before?
For me, analysis. I think Claude rather does a phenomenal job. When you look and you use like the Claude Anthropic's console.anthropic.com, and it's the dashboard. That's where you can work. And Beth, we did the whole demo. That was the punt show. I'm just going to punt, where we were talking about Anthropic's tool for this, which is free to go use. I mean, if you have a Claude account, you can go do it. You don't have to have a paid account to use it. My point to it, though, is, Andy, the analysis part of it. Now, it looks different inside of ChatGPT. I would not write it with the analysis tag the way that Anthropic suggests I do, but it works either way. You just, to me, I just clean up the prompt depending on where I want to use it. It goes into the sort of the idea of this chain of thought thinking that obviously Anthropic is pushes. I mean, if you read any of the articles, Anthropic themselves is like chain of thought. That's where you should be putting your effort and stuff like that. But they're really good about saying, this is how I want to think through this problem. I want to do analysis first. In other words, I want the LLM Claude to do the analysis first. I want it to show me its thinking, because what Anthropic says in their documentation is chain of thought and analysis doesn't matter if it can't see it. And I think that goes back to Beth's point that you made before, is like, well, it's a prediction engine. Well, how is it going to predict the next best using its context memory? Well, that depends on what's being shown in the context. So usually it's that, let me work through this analysis, let me see it. The examples Anthropic would be given for a math problem, which is, did this student do this math problem right? Versus, hey, Claude, I want you to work through this math problem on your own. Do not look at the student's results or answer first. Determine what the answer is, Then look at the answer of the student and determine if the student got the question right. One of those will typically give you the wrong answer, and one of those will give you the right answer. And so it's that analysis that I think is a really big part that I've been leaning into more in the latter half of 2024 and definitely into 2025 that I was not doing before, because I don't think the models had the capability. At least I don't remember them having the capability to do really good analysis. What do you think, Beth?
I agree. I think the analysis feature is key. I'm going to say that my main tip is let's just call it the punt. Okay. And the punt comes in two ways. The first is start a new conversation, right? Like just clean slate, go. And that existed before. But the second version of the punt is use a different model, go somewhere else. This started being talked about more in terms of having models code for you. Like when you have a model that is coding something, at some point it seems like the most predictable response is what it did wrong before, which is super not helpful, right? But if you take the code and you pop it in, like you've had ChatGPT building something and you pop it into Anthropic may find it, right? Gemini may find it. And I find that the coding abilities of the models have drastically increased since 2024. And they're on par to be able to do that with each other, right? Like I could and did take code from ChatGPT and give it to Gemini to look at, and so it could look, but it was not helpful. Now it is helpful. So if you're like banging into a wall, is it time to punt? Like find something else? Yes, Perplexity as well. Cool.
So that reminds me that one of the things that's new in 2025, in my experience, is in ChatGPT, the generation of Python code as part of its process. So instead of having, I think if you went back to 2023, it couldn't even do that kind of function. If you get to early 2024, you'd have to explicitly request that it did that kind of thing. Post-analysis, now I want you to generate code that will do this. Well, now you just give it the natural language instruction in your instructions, and you'll watch as it goes through that process, and it's using Python to do that. So that's a big change. And I would say the other big change, sort of the high-level change that we have now, is the quality of the prompt support from the LLM. And by that, I mean, we always had, all the way back to early 2023, we had Prompt Perfect, right? Somebody had written something, which was an outboard service where you could take a prompt, give it the prompt, or just start writing a prompt, and it would do that. It came out as a custom GPT, but Prompt Perfect was one of the early plugins, I think, for ChatGPT. And so it's always been possible to use the LLMs to assist you in generating a prompt. But now with the console at Claude and just in general, you just do it conversationally. Hey, here's what I want to do. Give me a prompt to do it. The LLM can do that. So that's given rise to the theory, let's say, that prompt engineering is not a thing. Remember, go back, rewind to when everybody was going to have to study prompt engineering. Well, no, it turns out you don't have to because the LLMs can do prompt engineering.
Yes, I think you do have to put time into it. I don't know that you need to study as if you're going to get a job as a prompt engineer, whatever that might be in the future, because I agree. But should everybody be putting time into this in their day-to-day and whatever their industry expertise is, so that they're using it with answers that they should know and things like that? I mean, yeah, 100%. Like everybody should be spending, I think, as much time
by
as
investing a small amount of time on a specific project where you do it in custom GPT or in a Claude project, or wherever you want to do it. I think you'll be really satisfied to find that you're getting very close to a fully automated assistant process, right? Once you build a prompt with full instructions that does a series of tasks and generates an output for you, that ends up being this module that you can call on repeatedly. And originally we had to do prompt libraries. Okay, I got to capture my prompt that worked pretty well in my chat interface. I'm going to go save it in a prompt library so I can use it again by cutting and pasting and putting it in. Well, now the major models have offered these platforms, and specifically custom GPTs and projects that allow you to build instructions into that particular module. And then that module is something that I think you'll find repeatedly valuable to you in the future. So it's definitely worth your investment of time.
100%.
And
One thing sorry, Beth, I was going to just say the one thing we haven't really mentioned, but you kind of did with the Python, is artifacts on the Claude side and Canvas on the ChatGPT side. And while those aren't like new rules for prompting, to me, they have drastically changed how you work with prompts. So like as you're having that conversation, whether it's Canvas, which I love, and being able to do that inline editing, it moves us closer to that designer that blog was talking about versus like quote unquote just being a prompt engineer, because you're now interacting and working side by side, almost literally on the screen or in artifacts with Claude, whether it be with Python code and you're writing code, or you're just simply creating a document, like a cheat sheet for something or whatever it might be. I really do feel like those tools have really sort of changed the game as people are able to do it. And it should make it easier, I would think, Beth, for newbies to get in there and work with prompting, because having that on the right side and being able to see it more clearly does go a really long way, I think, to helping keep things clear. Like what is it I'm working on? I actually like the Claude side with the artifacts that it does it by pages. And that's something I think that Canvas is missing. Canvas will overwrite.
Yeah.
Artifacts, you can actually go back 2 or 3 pages and it makes it much clearer. You can go up your prompt or up your thread and pick older ones inside of ChatGPT. But I've had people come to me and they're like, this is confusing to me. I'm like, that's because it's confusing. Like it's not the same. One of them is a better structure, I think, than the other. I interrupted you, Beth. Sorry, but I was also going to say we should go and talk about video and images as well.
Okay, and we have some people in the chat sharing their processes. So I'm going to say that yes, the core is you want to know what your end result is. So if you have an example of your end result, you're going to do the example thing. If you are going to use Canvas, you're going to do something, you're going to put it on Canvas. Now you can do things with that. All of those kind of are getting at the same piece of needing to know what you want and be clear about that. So I want to go back. I think it was Justin said he starts with a prompt that analyzes his query for context, scope, objective, creates a framework that addresses it, refines the query, those sorts of things, right? So that it can be, so that that's basically taking what you wrote, what you wanted, and putting it in a particular structure. The other, we've talked about using ChatGPT and Perplexity, and then putting things in Notebook LM. That came from Greg, and then Justin sort of added more in terms of doing the research in Perplexity and ChatGPT, and then updating Notebook LM. Yes. All right. I cannot speak while I'm watching the chat. So thank you all for your chat, people. Yep. And now I'm just like, let me move that off.
No, I do. Can I just say the Justin one really quick? Because you're right. He was talking about, he says, I outline my query in ChatGPT, gather the research for Perplexity, create a detailed PDF, refine the gaps with other models, and then upload the PDF research and the focus prompts to Notebook LM. That's a great process. And then people were loving it in the comments too. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Justin. Thank you for sharing that. What a great use case of moving towards that PDF, because you know that Google's Notebook LM can do really well with that, as well as other tools as well. But that's a great process. Great job.
So in terms of I'm going to move to image and video. In terms of image and video, it is similar and different. You want to know the language that people use when they are making images, because that is language that the film and image models have been trained on. You also want to know what you're looking for, and sometimes that's going to be an example, right? And I can pull up some of that, but in Midjourney you can upload discrete images and then ask Midjourney to blend them. You can upload discrete images that are defined as a character reference, and then you can get more of that particular character. It's not perfect, identical, but there are ways to get really close. And for video, the same thing is true. Like the image models have been trained to analyze an image and then create another image. So if you start to communicate it within the image, you can get really far. And that, I feel, is again more important because you don't know what the language means to the model. There was a time where when you said red to Midjourney, like, forget all other colors, right? Image wise, red was like the most powerful thing.
I think it's an interesting point that, you know, the new multimodal models, and that's something new, can receive an image as a prompt and just a simple request about the image. But you can put a lot of prompting information into an image and then get upload that as an image file and say, operate on this. You know, that's new. That's definitely new and something that we ought to practice with. I rarely do it, but you can actually do a sketch of something that is an explanation of something that you want to achieve in image output or in text output. Like, here's a workflow diagram that I just scratched out on a piece of paper, and now I want you to provide me with a step-by-step information flow description in text for what's being shown on this image. That's a prompt.
So what we're talking about also is the idea of inline editing. So in text, that's sort of canvas, but there isn't a really great kind of analogy for text. But in images, if you get something that is close or something that's hard, like it's hard to get an image that does this, right? To have this kind of focus. So for people who are listening, I put my finger really close to camera so my hand looks bigger and it's pointing. You can get pieces of that and then inline edit around it. So that is an iterative visual approach. That wasn't functional. I mean, it existed last year, but it's a real tool now. There's also world building kind of stuff. Like, I find what's happening in video and image to be really exciting.
100%. Yeah.
We'll do a Midjourney show at some point.
I don't know what's going on with my voice today. I apologize. I will, if you can share my screen here, I'm about to share it, Beth. But I'll just show you a video that was created yesterday, just to show like where I think like the more in-depth, and I'll just put it here. It's probably gonna be a little grainy, but this came out of this is a Google FX, their latest model to it. And just, I don't know, to me, when you look at the shadows and things like that, I'm not going to say it looks 100% real, but let me know what you guys think on this one. So for those that can see this, obviously I know some people are listening to us or whatever. This to me really shows like where these models are going and what it takes to, with the prompting. So kind of like, Beth, you're a much better expert in video and image than I am, but I am noticing just in my limited use of it, that's just not dog under desk walks away, right? That's zoom in shot. I'm talking about the lighting, things that people were already doing in Midjourney and getting really good results are now really translating, I feel like, into these video models to get really good one-off results. Like, and that's one single prompt. I didn't do that 7 times. That's one of the 4 videos that was provided back to me. And then when you look at the shadowing, even though there's no audio, obviously, you can see, because it was in the prompt, the dog gets in trouble because it's biting on the cords. And when the dog gets out of the desk and looks up at the human coming into frame, the dog puts his head down and it sinks away underneath past the human or whatever. And I'm like, that's coming from the prompting, and it's subtle. It's like these subtle things that are now happening in these videos and images, just really mind-boggling me to where we are. But anyway, this is a prompting conversation. My point is saying is, like, I've seen it. Like, if you put the time and effort into being detailed in your prompts, at least with the video images, I'm seeing a huge improvement there, with that prompting. So, little goes a long way as far as just expanding it out. And also use the LLMs to help you put really good,
right.
You don't know how to do it, use an LLM, use one of the models to help you write a better prompt,
Right. So I agree. I think that that's sort of where, like, if I'm wrapping up what my message is start where you are and know that the and where you want to go, and know that the LLM can help you get there. Right. So you have a goal for an image, but you don't know what that lighting is called. Right. So you give the image and it tells you what the light is called. Or maybe you just take the image and you blend it in something. You have a goal for a LinkedIn post, a LinkedIn article. Okay, so you have a LinkedIn article that you like that somebody else wrote, or you have a previous one that you're really pleased with. Start where you are with the goal, and then let the system that you're using, the LLM that you're using, move you iteratively forward. Is my approach.
That makes sense to me. I have a few, but I'll just rapid fire through these because we are out of time. I talked about not having to give specific URLs. These aren't in any particular order. Just I literally have a notepad open up on my other screen here. So lean on the new search abilities because they're frankly great. That's specifically to ChatGPT when I'm talking about that. Obviously, we talked about clear instructions. Specificity is key to me. We've talked about that, when you would, when you wouldn't. Using reference text. I love personally using quotes when I'm trying to get the output to say a certain thing. Just know that you can put quotes around stuff as far as a reference text to get it to behave a certain way in quotes. Basically, you're saying back to the, it's like saying hello world with the famous starter Python script, which is about as far as I ever got, was like print hello world. Hello world, it's like, that's kind of what you're doing here, is you're saying, do this, say this back to the user. Or if it's you and you're just trying to create a certain experience, you can do that. Ask for citations. This is a big one. Ask for what you want. So yes, built into ChatGPT, you have, model ability or image abilities. You have, code interpreter. You have using Canvas. You have web search. If you want them to happen at certain points as you're building out like a workflow, and these maybe be a little bit more advanced prompts, then ask for them specifically in your prompting where you want them to happen. So if you want citations, be clear about that you want citations for it. Should ChatGPT kind of always do that? Yes, but it doesn't. So be clear in your instructions about that. Said that one. I love subtasks, but Andy kind of covered that as far as like if you're doing longer ones, subtasks for the win for me, because it really makes it easy and breaks it out for the model to understand specifically what are the steps that I need to be following in order to give the result. So we talked about that a little bit. Letting the model think out loud, I think, is a big one. We sort of talked about that with Anthropic, but that analysis idea, let it think out loud, because that thinking out loud can actually inform better results down the line in the context. One of the things people don't think about too is like, if you're having, this is a one-off, but if you have a long thread, you're just working collaboratively with the LLM, as we've been talking about, and you have this long thread, one of the things you can do if you're worried about the context window running out on you is just to pause early enough to say, hey, summarize, or whatever terms you want to use, our conversation with these points up to this point. What that does is brings the best, most valuable stuff from up high and brings it back into the most recent context thread. That way, if it quote unquote rolls off into the ether and is no longer part of the context memory, you've basically brought the important things back into the conversation, which is just that's a prompting technique. It's a long conversation prompting technique. If you're going to be going back and forth iteratively, then that might be something that you might go, ooh, let me pause really quick and bring in the most important information before I proceed. That way it stays inside the context window. And I think we said everything else. Internal monologues and analysis tags. That's huge. Internal monologues on the ChatGPT side, analysis tags on the Anthropic side. And then and then my last one is, and this really hasn't changed, but it's just a good reminder, telling a model what to do versus what not to do is really important. Not that you can't say, don't do this, but I always find that you're going to get better results if you say, do this. This is what the intended outcome is, as opposed to the negatives. Work on the positive side of this is what I'm expecting from it. I usually get better results. So sort of rapid fire, but these are from my notes that I wanted to share today. Any last ones you guys want to share before we start wrapping up?
Let's see, for my notes. This is an oldie but a goodie, and it's come back, and it references what's happening in the conversation that's happening in the chat right now. If you are running into trouble, make it simpler. If you are having it do a series of steps in a task, break that out into separate pieces and put them and find out where the problem is. And you can then also do them in sequence. So people were talking about, is there a way to switch models automatically, or can automation help with some of this? And yes, we use Respell. Hey, Respell, sponsor us. But we use Respell, and Respell is actually a lovely visual interface. It's better than Make or Zapier in terms of its interface. And you can just drag connectors from one prompt to another if you're feeding that information in. You obviously Make and Zapier, you also do this. You just have to write it and do it in a different way. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say. So when you run into trouble, simplify things. And yes, you can string prompts together. That works really well if you are using a couple different models, because Claude is great at writing, but you don't want to use you want to use a research thing before you get to Claude. Those are things that can happen with that kind of thing. So make it simple and chain things together.
Andy, last thoughts?
Yeah. First, avoid ambiguity in the following way. First, if you're writing instructions for an LLM to do a series of steps, then use separate sentences or bullet points for each of those steps. Don't put them into a long compound sentence. Prioritize those steps, right? At least list them in an order of importance, if not in the actual sequence in which you want them to be executed.
Okay. Yeah,
Cool.
That sounds good. Well, we'll leave it there. Hopefully you guys have gotten a lot out of it. We have a lot of people thanking us in the comments. Thank you guys for hanging out with us as always. We hope this has been helpful to you. Like I said, this is one of our bigger shows that we did early in 2024, which is why we wanted to bring it back around and just talk about how we're using prompting. Obviously, Beth, Andy, and myself, we all have unique ways that we're using it because of what our roles are, our jobs are, how we're helping other people, teaching and stuff like that. So there you go. You're getting 3 different perspectives, but all of it generally goes in the same direction, which is get started, get out there, get started, work with it, break it, fix it, have fun with it. That's what it's really all about. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to us, and we will get you going in the right direction. And I think we're going to have more sessions on that in 2025, trying to help people out with these type of things. So it'll be fun. Hey, on Monday, Beth just put it in the comments, but we had this funny idea last week where we were talking about our predictions that we were saying before we went live, there's predictions, and then there's predictions that aren't really predictions. They're just sort of pie in the sky, out there predictions. And we thought, we don't want to ruin our predictions for 2025, but we do kind of want to have this conversation. So that's what Monday is going to be about, is what are we really hoping? What's out there? What are we really hoping happens in 2025 that is a little bit more wacky, a little bit more pie in the sky? So that'll be a fun Monday conversation. Come on back. Don't forget, we have the newsletter that you can sign up for. It goes out on Sunday morning, so you can sign up for it anytime between now and then. Just go over to the halliday.com in order to sign up for that. With that, we'll say, have a great one. Thanks for hanging out with us on this holiday week. I'm thinking everybody will be back to the grind and whatnot on Monday. So we will see you then. Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.